But I want to welcome everybody to the March EveryStem Zoom, and I want to introduce you guys to Scott Shepard. He is the host of the Flower Podcast, and I don't know how many of you listen to the podcast, but it is a great one. And I've been listening to Scott for a long time. I've been a fan of his. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about Scott is that he has a really extensive background in flower buying, wholesaling, growing flowers, working with farmers and growers, and kind of the whole part of the industry that a lot of us as event and retail florists, we don't really know a lot about it. It's important for us as florists who are selling the final product to our clients to really understand how our product gets to us, build relationships with the people who are wholesaling and growing and selling us our products, and to really make the best decisions, and so that we can understand how to build better relationships with our wholesalers and our growers and our farmers that we want to work with, or if we're growing our own product, how we can sell that product to other florists. So I think Scott has a really unique background, a little bit different than what most of us do as far as, us being the retail florists. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. I've got a few questions that some of the EveryStem members have already submitted that we're going to ask Scott. But as we talk and have this conversation, I want you guys to feel comfortable popping questions in the chat or just unmuting yourself and asking a question if you have one, because this is a great opportunity, just like we were talking to Lizette about something that's going on with her delphinium this week. It's a great opportunity for us to get some of the conversation about the wording, how we should kind of talk to our wholesalers and communicate our needs, and really set our expectations so that we can have a good relationship if something does go wrong and a product isn't great, how we can kind of handle that. So welcome, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. This is a real pleasure and an honor to get to chat about what I do every day. I'm excited about it.
That's great. So tell us just a little bit about what you do, your history. I know you have a long history in the floral industry, but tell us a little bit about kind of, maybe the last few years of what you've been doing and how you started the Flower Podcast, kind of like how that came about, because I think that's a really interesting story.
Well, thanks. Well, sure. Well, it is a long story. So the short version is when I graduated from Georgia with my horticulture degree, I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I loved flowers. I loved everything to do about flowers. And my advisor got a phone call from a wholesaler that was kind of like a broker, and they were looking for somebody, and they described me perfectly. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is a sign. Maybe this is my calling, literally. And so I went for an interview, and I didn't know when you're studying horticulture, they don't really talk about cut flowers that much, even though my advisor does a lot of cut flower research. But from the floristry side, no really entertained this idea, like working for a wholesaler or doing any of this. And so right out of college, and I won't say what year, I almost did, but I started working at this wholesaler, kind of wholesaler. And basically, I took a little break here and there, but for almost 30 years, that's kind of what I did. And doing different things where I bought flowers, I sold flowers, I worked with wedding and event professionals, I worked with brick and mortar, shops. We did all kinds of stuff. I also bought hard goods. I mean, I've kind of done it all. Worked with local growers, did all those things throughout the 30 years I've been doing it. But then probably about, well, actually 6 years ago in April, we started recording for our very first episode of the Flower Podcast. And I used to commute into Atlanta like an hour in the morning and an hour and a half in the evening. And the I got so tired of the radio, and I listened to books on tape or CDs, or depending on where we were in the timeline there. But I somebody put me on a podcast, and I'm like, okay, well, I've got to search about flowers. What is there out there in flowers? And I really didn't look into gardening. I was really looking more into floristry. And so there were about five of us back then. And I thought, you know what? And I listened to several of them, and I listened to some of the interviews with people I knew, like I knew Holly Chapel, and I knew Sue McCleary, and I mean I knew these people, and it was like I didn't I was like, there's a lot more to their story than I heard in what the episodes I would hear. So I thought, my kids are big gamers. They love to create videos for YouTube back then even. And it was like they had all the gear. They had the sound equipment. We had the software, we had everything. So we're like, this is really kind of a slam dunk. And so we talked and they're like, sure, let's do it. And the rest is history. We launched in July of 2018. We were probably about the sixth podcast back in those days that really kind of, did the gamut. I'm gonna say that I feel like I was probably one of the first ones, and this is just because I get bored easy, y'all. And so they had florists and farmers and wedding and event. I mean, we kind of have a little bit of everybody. We weren't so focused on one genre or one target group just because I feel like we can learn things from all the different facets. I think when we hear the stories of flower farmers, especially local, we kind of think we understand better what they go through. We maybe grasp new things that are coming, or when we're listening to big event florists, we kind of, okay, maybe we can learn a few tricks, or a brick and mortar shop, like the way they think is totally different because they're doing dailies every single day. So it's all these different dynamics, and I just felt like we could learn from each other. And so then that kind of got me through the pandemic. And then while during the pandemic, I had a lot of job offers because I had left the wholesale house that I was at,
Mhm.
and just wasn't the right fit. And then I got a phone call from one of my past guests and actually one of my vendors, Bethany Little from Charles Little and Company out in Oregon. She's like, here's this guy in Nashville, and he's wondering if maybe you'd think about working for him. And I'm like, sure. I mean, and what was funny was I had just had another offer that I was seriously considering. And I'm like, well, he needs to call me kind of quick because I'm really having to make a decision. And sure enough, we made it work. And I had COVID at the time, which was, I mean, talk about a train wreck. Had COVID, and then he was patient. He gave me like 2 weeks to kind of get well, and then I drove up here to Nashville, checked out the place, and yeah, and now I'm in Nashville, and I'm the main buyer there at it's Import Flowers. So yeah,
That's so cool. I love that story. And I think just the fact that you're driving back and forth to work every day, listening to all these different things and going, I could create something that other people would actually want to listen to while they're driving back and forth, like there's some value in that. And I think that's so awesome because it is the catalyst. It doesn't have to be this big aha moment, right? Like it can just be like,
yeah,
hey, like it's kind of how I started EveryStem. It was like, I know how to do this, and I see a lot of other people struggling with this, and I think maybe I can help some people, and it doesn't have to be this like loud, wild moment to kind of find something that, you can really bring a lot of joy and a lot of education and a lot of great value to other people. And I think your podcast does that. And it's so
thank you.
great because of the variety. I know that especially because of EveryStem with the software, we have a lot of different kinds of members. There are retail florist members, farmer florist members, wedding and event members, and so there are a lot of tricks and tips that I've learned from different people in different parts of floristry that you can really apply to others. And so I think that's really kind of a smart take of saying, like, let's not limit ourselves just because I do only retail, that I would never listen to something that an event florist has to say, or just because I don't grow my own flowers, I wouldn't want to learn from a flower grower, because I think there's so much value there that, yeah, maybe not everything applies, but I think there is a lot of like cross, opportunity there for us to kind of really learn from each other. So
Yeah,
that's,
I agree. One thing I just want to add is, a lot of times we may not, as you said, we may not do those things. We may not grow flowers. We may not do weddings. We may, whatever it is. And at the same time, though, when you have that opportunity, to see what goes behind it. It helps you sometimes communicate with those people, I think. I think, if you understand the dynamics of flower farming, it helps you, have that communication with local flower farmers. If it's wholesalers in this situation, it helps you understand maybe the bigger picture of what those dynamics and how to better communicate. So I just think, I don't know, I learn stuff every week. So I feel like if I do, I hope somebody else does too.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point because I think a lot of it is communication. And when some of you got on the call originally, we were talking to Lizette, who's one of our EveryStem members, and she had an issue this week and that we're going to address with her wholesaler. But I think part of it, since Scott just brought up communication, is managing expectations.
Mm.
So let's get into some of the questions that our members have asked. And, I think that one of the biggest questions that a lot of florists want to know, and this was from LuAnn. She asked, what do you wish your customers, florists, could do to make a wholesaler's job easier? Let's start with that one, because I think that's a really good one. Like, what could we do to make, if you, I know you've bought flowers and you've been a rep where you've helped the florist, like what in your experience makes it easier to work with florist A over florist B?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And I could probably talk about this for an hour. So I want to really try to hone this in. I think in a nutshell, I think you really hit it out of the park when you said manage expectations. Because yes, a wholesaler sometimes goes through the motions of trying to do that. And I feel like that's just part of the process. When some of the I've had the privilege of working with some huge wedding and event designers. And somebody just asked me the other day, because one of them was like, everyone here probably has heard of Carrie Underwood. Well, we supplied all the flowers for her wedding. And
Oh, that's
it was
cool.
it was pretty cool. Also, like the second Hunger Games movie, one of my people supplied all the flowers. That was a big flower budget for that particular movie. That doesn't always happen, but and so anyway, there's a lot of opportunities out there. The things that stand out to me is when you are as a florist, when you're planning a wedding, when you're planning daily events, when you're planning daily deliveries, is what I meant. I think it's really important to understand the bigger picture sometimes. For example, if you are selling a wedding in March and you have a bride or a customer that has to have peonies.
Mhm.
How many here have had that situation? I don't know if anybody else in the room has, but I get the request time and time and time again. Well, peonies are available. Okay, they are available, and they are forced this time of year. So when you force a peony, it doesn't get to be the big, amazing peony that we expect in late April, May, and June, or from Alaska, July. It's not the same peony because we're waiting. I mean, think about it. If you get woken up in the middle of the night, let's say 3 a.m., you get woken up. Are you performing at your peak at that point when you haven't had any sleep and you haven't had a shower or coffee? No, you're just kind of struggling to get through those first few moments. Well, peonies are the same way. So they wake them up, they trick them into thinking, oh, it's time to bloom. And so because of that, they don't get the development. They're smaller because they don't reach their full potential. And the stem length suffers, the bud size suffer, and then, but we have customers who are like, oh my gosh, we have to have these peonies. I'm like, okay, I'm warning you, they're going to be small. No, I've got to have them. And I try to give all the caveats. I'm like, I'd get a ranunculus. It'll probably be bigger. I mean, I'm just like trying to help, or garden rose or something. And sure enough, they come in, and then sure enough, guess what? They're disappointed. This is a peony. And this isn't any bigger than a walnut. I mean, I've heard that 1,000 times. I mean, it's like it's the truth. And I'm like, I tried to tell you. I
Right?
really did try to tell you.
Yep.
And then sometimes, the peonies make a liar out of me. Okay. And that's really frustrating. Like I'll order 4 colors because we have to have something. And one of the varieties will end up being decent. I mean, not spectacular, but decent,
Mhm.
respectable. And then they're like, well, see, those look good. And I'm like, okay, but you don't understand. That's the 1 in 50 that happens to. The rest of them is not. It's not the case. So sometimes one of the things is managing expectation with your customers as a florist and trying to say, great, we probably can get these, but they're not going to be what you envision. They're not going to be this big. And just those little cues and those little things I think make a big difference. Also, a lot of times it's really helpful to sell color and not variety. To sell, you can say, oh, Juliet. I mean, I'm going to use Juliet because Juliet's an easy rose to get now. The only problem with Juliet garden roses is maybe it's October, and we'll talk about that in a second. But there are certain things that it's just better to sell the color or the concept or the shape, or because they're coming to you a lot of times. Your customers come to you because of your aesthetic, because they've seen other photographs of your work. They've seen other, maybe they attended the wedding or they've attended an event where they've seen your design style and they're like, wow, I want that. Okay. So remember, they want you because your design style, not because you used uh, butterfly ranunculus, not because you use. Now they might, if you use local flowers and you try to source a lot of local, they might have seen, oh, I respect that and I want to support that. But again, it's not a specific flower. It's an idea that you want to support local. So these ideas are the reasons why customers come to us. The customer, yeah, I don't know. Am I saying anything that's resonating with anybody?
Yeah, I think so. Got people nodding. Yes, definitely. So I think that's right. And I think it's a good point that Scott's making here is that, I've had this in the past where I've bought a certain flower. Let's use the peony example, and you're paying $6.90 or $7.90 a stem for this flower. And maybe at the same wholesaler, you're looking at a garden rose that's, significantly larger and it's only $2.90 or something like that. So, you know, that is a really important thing. And I think one of the benefits of using EveryStem or kind of having a system where you're building recipes and you're thinking about seasonality and you're thinking about the flower varieties is that when you're doing that, you can look at the pricing and you can say, okay, is a peony at $7.90, is that the best choice that I should give my client in March? Knowing it's not really in the season? Or should I be thinking about maybe doing a garden rose or some other variety of flower that's going to be different, but that's going to be, some of the ranunculus sometimes are almost as big as the peonies when they're small. So
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing and so if a florist wants to do that, Scott, like really start to understand seasonality and really understand like, you know, seasonal changes and some of that stuff. Is that something that they can really talk to their wholesaler about? Is that something that the wholesaler should be willing to have discussions about with their customer?
Yeah, great question again. I want to say yes, they should be. Um, Sometimes timing is important. Uh, it always happens the week of Mother's Day that's coming up, not too long, that somebody says, I have a wedding in November and I need this. No, 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 no. And we're like, okay, we really don't have the bandwidth to have this conversation right now, but I've got to do a quote. And I'm like, okay, I understand, but right now we have 100 other customers to deal with because of Mother's Day. I mean, it's just so I think being sensitive to that sometimes can play a part into it. Also knowing that like mornings are probably one of the busiest times of day for most wholesalers because they're getting orders out, taking orders. They've got, they're dealing with shipments, things like that. Afternoons are probably a better time for that kind of question. I'd also say email. Sometimes people respond to emails better because then they have time to think about it. But I will say this, don't be afraid that, if you get an email and you go back and forth, sometimes there's some things that get lost in the translation. And I still think it's not a bad idea after you've had a few email exchanges to sit back and make a phone call. Nothing replaces phone calls or that in-person conversation. And it's okay to say, okay, just so we're on the same page. When we're talking about, just go through the order. I used to get, I don't want to say who the customer is because most of y'all would know who they are. But but I used to get these orders and they would be 3 pages long. It'd be for a big event. And then I'd find out what their budget is. And I always ask the budget. And sometimes I think florists don't like to give that information because they feel like their wholesaler is going to gouge them, you know? But if you trust the person you're working with, then guess what? You should trust them. If you trust them with your flowers, which is the most important thing for your brand and your business, you probably can also trust them with your budget and let them know because sometimes like I'd get these, I'd get a $10,000 budget and she'd order $25,000 of flowers. And so right away, I sit there, I'm like, look, these items here are very expensive items. Maybe we can find substitutes or cut them all together. And sure enough, we'd end up cutting things, and we'd get it down. And they just like to ask the world because sometimes they didn't know what was available. But the beauty of this process, again, this goes back to hopefully you have a rep or somebody that you trust and work with that I got to know my customers. I got to know sort of their styles. I'd also, and I wouldn't be afraid to do this, but I would ask for mood boards because a lot of times I see flowers that would fit their profiles better. Nobody knew that this flower was going to show up. It's a brand, like trying to think of a good example. I brought in some Japanese ranunculus a few weeks ago because I had never seen it before and I wanted to see it. Well, didn't know it was going to be as fabulous as it was. Okay.
They're amazing.
And
Yeah.
I know. And so, but it would have been perfect for a certain profile, and so if maybe something like a peony, like we talked about earlier, a peony wouldn't work. Well, maybe this would have been a good sub for that. And so, it's sometimes by having the mood boards and a sales rep that can work with you to kind of proactively put out fires, that goes a long way. Now, I know that I get this statement, and I hear it, I don't have a Scott that works at my wholesale house. I don't have, maybe there's somebody else that's like really special you click with. They get you, they get what you do. That is a resource. I always viewed my relationship with my customers as I'm part of your team. I am on your A team. And I'm the person, that helps source, put out fires. But I also, as soon as I see a fire, I try to communicate that. And you want your person to do the same thing. I think that a lot of times, we may not want the bad news, but how many of us would rather have that bad news than you show up to pick up your order and then you get surprised? I mean, this didn't come in and this didn't come in and this didn't come in. And it's like, it's so frustrating. But I think there's ways to work around it. And I think communication is, we keep, that's going to be a theme, I think. It's going to be throughout this talk. So
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I know that when I first started, buying flowers as a retail florist, I knew that the relationship with the wholesaler was going to be very important. And I was super spoiled because I could walk to my wholesaler and they're still there and my flower shop is still there. I sold it, but the new, the person who owns it there, she walks back and forth. They have a little cart and they buy their flowers and they go back and forth. And it's great because it's it's Austin Flower Company. They're a smaller business. I know the owner, I know the buyer. And it took me a while, even through that closeness of proximity, to build a relationship and to get to the point where I could say, listen, I would rather have you tell me as soon as you know if something's not available or something's not right. And sometimes they don't know right away, like sometimes the grower isn't communicating with the wholesaler, so there is a kind of the telephone game there. But if I could find out even a few days before Then what I could do is decide, okay, can we get a substitute? If we can't get a substitute, and this is a very particular client, which I used to have a lot of very particular clients. I don't know why. I just got those people. That was who I attracted a lot of times. And I learned over the years to just let them know ahead of time. I would literally call the bride or call the mother, whoever was in charge of the wedding, and I would say, hey, this is what's happening. This flower is not available, or for whatever reason, we can't get a certain quantity of it or whatever. This is what we're going to do instead. And a lot of times I would give them two options. I wouldn't give them a bunch of options, and I wouldn't give them the free rein to decide, or to come up with an idea. I would say, here's option A. We're going to order that flower anyway. And if it doesn't come in right, we're going to sub more of this. Or option B, we can switch to the Japanese ranunculus and we're going to use that one. And a lot of times they would just say, okay, LuAnn, I like both of those options. I don't know what's better. You're the expert. You decide. And then I could work with my wholesaler to figure out what the best choice was. Maybe, we're looking at price because Japanese ranunculus are probably just as expensive as peonies, right? So do we want to do that? Or do we want to go with some other option? But I think really communicating up front with your client, if you tell them, hey, this is what's happening, and I know you don't want to call the bride 3 days before her wedding, but it makes it so much better than walking in, like Scott was saying. I don't want to walk into the wholesaler and get bad news that my flowers aren't there. The bride doesn't want me to walk in on her wedding day and kind of give her the bad news. It's so much better if we kind of let them know ahead of time. And that's part of that managing expectations of saying, I'm going to let you know what's going on through this process. And flowers are natural, they're not manufactured. And we have to be able to kind of work with what nature gives us.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I want to hit on just briefly is lead time. I know before the pandemic, when I would buy and sell and deal with flowers, like you could turn around, like I could get an order on a Thursday or Friday and still make that happen, depending on the flowers, that did depend, and still make that happen by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of the week before. I order flowers out now about 2 weeks. And actually, if you count, like if you're doing a wedding on a Saturday, I'm ordering flowers almost 2.5 weeks before your Saturday wedding. And and the only reason why we do that is to secure the product, to see is there potential issues? Is there, everybody wants snowflakes. Well, guess what? It's prom season. It's wedding season. It's Mother's Day. It could be there's, a lot of times because we may only operate within one paradigm of our industry. We used to, I have to share this. So many times I'd have wedding and event people that would have a wedding the weekend of Mother's Day. And we've been getting pre-books and pre-orders for weeks ahead of time, right? Well, up the week before, they'd call me up and they'd say, I need I don't know, I need um hotspot. We'll say hotspot. Well, I need 150 stems of hotspot. Well, it's a hot pink rose and it's Mother's Day, so pink's popular, so prices are higher. If we can find them with real short notice, because they might have sold out. Well, they're like, well, I didn't know. I don't do Mother's Day. Why do I have to pay more? And I'm like, really? Really? You don't I'm like, okay, well, it's just, it's called supply and demand. And, that's just it. And it's like, just because you may not function in that part of the industry doesn't mean it doesn't have ripples into the other parts. And so I think being aware sometimes is just really important. But I'm sure everybody here is good about that. I'm sure it's not.
Well, I think that is
So,
important to think about, not only in the fact of like holidays and seasonality. We used to do almost every Valentine's Day, I would have some kind of small little wedding that would kind of get piled on top of all our Valentine's Day orders. And if it was small, we would usually take it. Um, but we would always have to tell the bride, like, we know you want all these red roses and you want all this Valentine's Day stuff, and we can probably get it for you, but we're going to have to plan much more in advance. You're going to pay a significant premium for all of this. And, Sometimes we would book the bride and sometimes we wouldn't. But, understanding that and kind of, even if you are an event florist and you only do studio work or you only do weddings, understanding the calendar and kind of knowing not only what's going on holiday wise, but also what's going on in your city. Like
Mm,
I'm in Austin,
yes.
Texas, and we have F1 and we have South by Southwest and we have the Austin City Limits Music Festival. These are weekends where the city is hectic, stuff is going on. There's a higher demand for flowers. There's lots of stuff happening. So kind of being aware of the calendar of what's happening in your city, and understanding, like sometimes I would say to myself, oh, why haven't I booked a wedding for October 15th? And then I would go, oh, it's Austin City Limits weekend. We're probably not going to have as many weddings that weekend, but maybe we'll have some other types of events going on because we used to do corporate things and, editorial things and stuff like that too. So it's really that's a really good point to just kind of think about from the entire perspective of being aware of that. And then also, I think another thing we might want to mention, Scott, is being aware of you need to buy different flowers, kind of different at different points so that they can open. If you have a wedding on a
Mm.
Saturday, we can't order, lilies to come in the Wednesday before or blooming branches to come in the Wednesday before and expect them to be open for the wedding on Saturday. Those flowers we need to buy and place an order for, in the order before that so that we can let them open for maybe a week or sometimes 2 weeks to give them the opportunity to get to full bloom. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that kind of timing of orders from your side of the business.
Well, I would love to talk about this because one of the things I love is dealing with blooming branches. And uh, I deal with a wide variety of flowering branches, and I deal with them in a wide variety of stages. So when I say, I mean, I start blooming branches in December and I go as late as I possibly can, which is usually Mother's Day-ish. Now, not the same things are in the same season at the same time, right? So I start with white quince and I usually end with Kwanzaa cherry, which is that double pink, that big ball, which everybody loves because little pom-pom looking things. And
Those
so
are so
that
pretty. Yeah.
they are. Well, that's usually the last one that we end up. So that being said, everything in between is varied, and you have to understand these dynamics. For example, when I get white cherry in, the very first white cherry I get, usually it's sometime in February. I'm going to just say late February to be safe. And it is much, much tighter than it is the end of mid-March. Like I just got white cherry in last week and it's already got little white tips and it's already cracking. I know that's going to be open in 7 days. That other stuff, I don't know when it's going to open. Let's just be honest. When it's that tight, it could be 3 weeks. It could be 3 weeks. So know the beginning of the season with a particular branch is going to be different than the end of the season with that branch. And it's just nature. And a lot of these branches also, once they start opening, you can refrigerate them to slow them down, but you cannot stop them. They will keep opening, even though you put them in the cooler. It will slow down, and depending on how late in the season it is for that branch will depend on how slow it goes. I have literally had white crabapple the end of April into the very first of May, and it exploded everywhere. They used it in an event. It was amazing. We literally got it in, and it was out the door like literally in 2 days. We had to keep it in the cooler. We had one entire cooler. We didn't have that much space, but we had it refrigerated because that's how far along it was. And then in the event, it was glorious. It was glorious, and the room just reeked of apple. It was just such a cool. It was a cool thing. Anyway, when they broke down the event, they had brought these huge sheets of plastic, and it looked like they were carrying out bodies. I mean, that's because they were trying to minimize the mess of petals shattering everywhere. I mean, it's going to
Mess.
open
Oh
before
yeah, they
spring.
can cause a huge mess. Yeah.
So they're laying them down, wrapping them up, and hauling them out. But that's we're dealing with nature. And the same thing kind of goes. I'm glad you mentioned, I think, lilies. because lilies are the same way. Depending on the farm and the time of year, most of the time it takes good 10 days to get white lilies open. Now, if you're dealing with bigger varieties, guess what? That tends to take longer than smaller varieties. It's got more work to do, right? It's got more work to get that bigger flower open. But like an Asiatic or an LA hybrid or some of these other varieties open a whole lot quicker. Now, I will say that if you're in the wholesaler and you are seeing lilies on the green side, you see this happen a lot of times after Valentine's Day because they've cut every single stem they could possibly make a buck on and just for Valentine's Day, which means there's usually a lag for a few days of the ones that are what we're used to that are more colored, more open. And so a lot of times the lilies are much greener, right? Those first couple weeks. So you have to plan for more time. But you also have to really pay attention because sometimes they can be so green, like they don't really ever open. And you've got to really, this is just learning the flowers. And I guess because I'm a flower geek, I can intuitively look at it and I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. With peonies or with lilies or some roses even. I mean, you can kind of look and you kind of know. And if something happens and it doesn't work out the way you want, well, remember that, file that away, make yourself a big note because, you know, the first time we can chalk up to education that we're learning, but the second time you're armed, right? You're armed is like, okay, I'm not comfortable with this lily. I don't want to take it. It's not going to work for me. But timing is important. I had a customer that used to get their lilies on, like if they had a Saturday wedding, not the Friday before, but the Friday before that, they'd get their lilies and start that opening process. Now they did have coolers. So once lilies get to that stage where you're like, wow, okay, they're really pretty, you can go ahead and put them in the cooler. Clean the pollen off, put them in the cooler. They'll still last a long time. I mean, honestly, they probably would last not in the cooler, but you want it to be fabulous, right, for your wedding. So that's definitely part of it. And I wanted to say one other thing, going back to two things real quick. One is roses also bloom in cycles. I mean, when you cut like for a heavy holiday, you know that that's going to impact roses for about 6 weeks. So it takes rose plants about 6 weeks to recover from cutting. It takes them that much time. So a lot of times after Valentine's Day, like the first, second, third week of March, you're like, why are rose prices so high? There's no holidays. We have Easter that coming up, but there's no holidays. Well, it's not that. It's that they plan and they get this huge bell. Think of a bell curve where they want Valentine's to fall on the top of that bell. They don't care what happens afterwards because that's when they're getting their most money. But as that bell goes down, supply is going down and it takes time to recover. Now they plan that perfectly because that bell keeps cycling so that way it peaks at Mother's Day too, right? And they want it to peak at both times. And so that's one of the ways they do it is by pinching in December, then they create the beginning of that bell and carry it through the holidays. So
That's really good to know, just because the timing of things that happen in March, you want to maybe then try to sell some other types of flowers to your clients at that time and not be so rose heavy on those events. Yeah.
or just know you might have to have substitutions. And you might have to sell, if you're selling a white rose, say this is my first choice and my second choice. That kind of thing. And the same thing happens in June. So a lot of times there's a lot of June weddings. Well, number one, there's a lot of June weddings. So that means demand's going to be high, but that bell still carries through for Mother's Day, which is the middle of the month, usually. And then it carries, into that first part of June. So
Do you get when you deal with clients or when you've dealt with clients in the past, did you like when they would say, okay, here's first choice, second choice, I mean, did you encourage that from your florist customers when you were dealing with customers one-on-one?
yeah, I would say I would encourage it because um knowing because I knew both sides of that equation.
Hmm.
But I will say, I mean, that can be frustrating for a florist to have to sit here and give and you have 20 items on the order. You don't want to have to come up with 20 substitutions. This is where that relationship I talked about earlier comes in handy. But if there's a couple items that are really important, either for your design aesthetic, like, you want a little, people call them dancers or little, ranunculus that have movement to them. Um, you know, if you want to have a substance, it's really important for your design. Well, maybe think of a scabiosa or something else that might be that could fill those shoes. Um, yeah, nobody wants to go through that for everything, but if there's a few key elements that are super important, and your rep or your wholesaler is telling you, I'm a little nervous. Well, it's okay. Maybe then say, well, maybe for those items, let's think of a plan B or a plan C and have options. Um, I also know there's things like Lily of the Valley. There's times of the year with Lily of the Valley. I mean, we pretty much do this year round. Where we're like, it's at your risk, and people are like, well, why? What happens if it comes in bad? And we're like, well, let me explain on that. The Dutch exporters, which are really the main source for Lily of the Valley most of the year, they won't. They don't want to take the gamble. So literally, when your wholesaler buys it, they're being told the same thing. It's at your risk. And so that's why when they say it to you, it's because they don't want to eat it. It's an expensive flower. And so sometimes that's why, understanding seasons with that too, where like typically the second 2 weeks of April into the maybe third week of May, that's Lily of the Valley season. So if you've got a bride who has to have it, try to gear them to that time of year, because that's when it's the most fabulous. It's the freshest looking. And but I mean, we still get pretty Lily of the Valley other times of year, but it's just then it's at it's at a risk. So maybe have some pretty silks as a backup.
Yeah, and
So,
sometimes silk flowers can be a good option. I mean, some of the florists that I still freelance for here in Austin, are using, some silk flowers to kind of fill in. It's so hot here, weather,
yeah,
temperature, a lot of those things come into play. And when you're doing really big installations, or, some of the florists I work for do really large, significantly sized events. If you're doing ceiling installations, or you're doing giant, things on a tree or something, a lot of people don't even realize that some of the flowers are fake. Once you blend it in with all the real flowers, it really actually does look really good. And then you can use them, over and over again. So that's another positive. So let's see, Scott. So this is a question that a couple people have asked me, and I want to get this one in while we have you here, because I think it's important. It's an important one for us to understand. I've had two different florists that I work with through EveryStem tell me that their rep at their wholesaler will not give them pricing before they place the flower order. And so they're having a challenge being able to figure out how to price their recipes and how to build their orders. So why do you, and you might not know this because I know different wholesalers have different policies, but do you know why some wholesalers don't share pricing in advance? And how can florists work with their wholesaler to gain insights into pricing earlier so they can build more accurate quotes for their clients?
sure. Well, I think that anytime you're building a quote, first of all, I would recommend building a buffer. I think buffers are really important, and it really does help protect everybody involved. It's maybe not the most competitive advantage, but I feel like if you can do that, then that is a way to help. On the wholesale side, I know this happens, it's happened to me, where you quote a price. Okay, we're just quoting a price based on current trends, and unforeseen things happen. Demand, product shortages. Like, for example, right now, one of our lily suppliers is having huge problems. And so, like, we're not even getting our standing order. So now we're having to source lilies somewhere else. Well, guess what? Now they're more expensive because that was a standing order. So we got a better price to pass along. Now we're shopping open market, which might be higher, especially in Easter. So it's a little, yeah, it's a thing. So if I quote a price, understand that that's not a firm price. Sometimes people are like, yeah, but you said it was going to be, and I'm like, I know, but that was based on the information. Things have changed, and I'm not trying to gouge you. But again, sometimes this is where communication does come in handy. where if there is a change or a problem, then does your rep call you? I mean, it happens a lot of times. Or I'm buying some certain special spray roads, and I'm like, I'm not seeing it available. Okay, so the one is like Miss Bombastic. I don't know if any of y'all know Miss Bombastic, but she the bomb. And so she's big garden shaped, little miniature garden shaped spray rose. It's white. It's a really pretty spray rose. But I only have like two places that I can really get it. It's not a widely grown one. It's a headache for growers sometimes. Some of these varieties, that's why a lot of times many of them don't grow. Or it could be like toffee or coffee break, where they really are only popular in the fall. So growers don't want to grow that rose for 12 months just for 6 weeks or 8 weeks of the season. So they rip it out. So that means there's fewer people growing that rose, which means the price goes up. Now, sometimes you can get a bargain on it in March and April, but that's just because it's a fire sale at that point. But now I forgot your question because I totally went on a tangent. This
No,
is what
I think
happens
that
with the
was a really
rabbits.
good, I think that was a really good answer, but I think you what you just said kind of gave me a thought that, I do when we deal with buying flowers, like when I have an event, which is very rare because I don't do as many weddings or things as I used to. But if I have one of my favorite wedding planner friends or a family friend or somebody who wants to get married and I'm doing their flowers, a lot of times what I'll do is I will reach out to my wholesaler. I will get the quoted prices, getting the idea of what's this going to run me. And then about 3 weeks before, when it's time for me to start placing the order and figuring out the final details, I will send that EveryStem list of the flowers and the prices that I'm expecting to pay over to my wholesaler. And he'll take a quick look at it and he'll say, oh, well, LuAnn, this all looks, fine, give or take a little bit. But if there's a flower that's on that list that's going to be significantly more expensive, like a toffee rose or, the lily of the valley, or something like that, then he can say to me, hey, LuAnn, this is actually going to be more, and he might be able to give me, I thought it was going to be, $10 a bunch, but now it's going to be $16 a bunch. Well, that gives me
Right.
an opportunity to go back into my software, adjust my recipes, and decide, do I want less of that flower? Do I want less of some other flower? How can I rework my design to stay within my budget, to deliver the client the quality and the look that I've promised them, and also, work with my wholesaler to make sure that I'm not just going to say, well, you said it was going to be $10 a bunch and now it's not. And, because that's something that as a wholesaler, you really can't control either. So maybe it's about, really kind of communicating and putting in that buffer. I think having a little bit of a buffer, you know, whether you put it into the price of the design or you build it into your delivery fees or your labor fees or however you want to do that, making sure that there's a little bit of space. In EveryStem, we have a thing called the difference, and it's basically what you should be charging your client and what you are actually planning to charge your client. And we want that difference to be positive because that way that's that buffer, that's that place where if we've got a $10 buffer on an arrangement and, some of the flowers are a little bit more expensive, we're going to be able to kind of make it work. And, we shoot for a 70% profit margin as kind of, our goal in general in floristry. That's kind of like one of the numbers. I know Allison Ellis, really promotes that with her flower math and kind of understanding that that's a high number. If it ends up being 68%, we're still going to make money. We're still going to be okay. So if there is a little bit of wiggle room there, we have to be understanding that there is that flexibility. So if we're shooting for a higher profit margin, or we understand the profit margin we need to get, then maybe when we're building our quotes and things like that, we should shoot for a slightly higher than that. That way we're building that buffer into the place.
What I don't know. I'd like to, I don't know this because I know Lizette's having an issue, and I really want to talk about a topic that I think will help people in general, and that is credits.
Yes.
Is everybody want to hear about credits at all? Um,
Yeah. Let's
yeah,
talk about that.
so this is a hard topic, and it's hard for a lot of reasons. But I want to start off by saying if you get product that you think is not good, then the clock is ticking from the moment you take possession of it. Okay. Most wholesalers have a 24-hour policy as far as something's not right to get a credit. Now, let me explain to you on my level as a buyer. Well, my see, I don't want to pay for the flowers either. If you got a box and you took it and I didn't see it, we didn't check it, you took it, you opened up the box, it's bad. So I don't want to pay for it. I don't want you to pay for it. So I want to get that credit also, right? Because if you don't give it to me in a timely manner, then I can't get a credit from my farm either because the clock is ticking for me as well. So things that they want for a credit. And I'm just trying to tell you this because this might make your credit process easier. Okay. If you have one stem of bad rose and you take a picture of a moldy rose and you send that to your wholesaler, they're going to be like, is it one rose? Are we getting a credit for one rose? No, they want to know, what is the magnitude of the credit? So things that they're looking for, volume. So if you get a box, I know like I said, we were talking about delphinium. If the box of delphinium is bad or the box of hydrangea, it got frozen and it has black patches, take the lid off the box. Don't sit there and go through the box. I would first take photographs of the entire box full and the bad patches of it. If you have 100 roses in a box and they're rotten or falling apart, put those 4 bunches of roses together on a table, take a photograph of it, take some close up. They need to see, because they have to show the farm that the entire box is bad. They have to show the farm that there's a problem with that box. If I only show 12 roses, I can't really ask for credit for 12 roses. I mean, to be honest with you guys, so what happens is we run the risk of ticking off our farms if we are asking credit all the time. So if we're asking now, if it's better product, like I have one vendor now I'm having issues with that literally every week I'm claiming. And I run the risk by going through that. I mean, it's a process we're working through, but at any time they could say, you know what, it's not worth me selling this product to you. And they cut me off. And they don't do that. But when it's legitimately, when I'm making a case history, it's hard for them to do that because I've proven a history. Other things besides that volume of product. If your roses are in sleeves, get a picture of that sleeve, get a picture of the name of that rose with your pictures because then they can see, oh, this is my farm. Because if they can find a loophole, they're going to find it. This is my farm. This is the variety. Like we had an entire box of Moab come in that was quicksand. So it's really hard to prove that my box of quicksands wasn't really a box of quicksands that I just put a Moab label on, right? So, but lucky for us, they had a label that said quicksand and a label that said Moab. So they just put a Moab label on a quicksand box. And they complained. They're like, dude, we can't see the roses in the box to know that. I'm like, read the labels. Just read the labels. And those labels, like they couldn't argue with me anymore because they saw labels. It's
Yeah,
their
they're like, wait a
labels.
minute. Oh, okay, we get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So labels, boxes, box volumes, the actual problem, all those things are important. Now, let's say your roses look fine. So you hydrated them, you took the wrappers off, and now they're falling apart. So, I mean, this is a really depressing conversation for someone like myself. But let's say that happens. That's what happens. Again, you want to take pictures of, you know, the mass of all the carnage, we'll call it. You want to take pictures of that. So that way, again, you can build your case. But know that if it is past 24 hours, let's say and the excuse that I'm busy, unfortunately, doesn't work when you're trying to get credits because the clock is ticking for everybody. Because I've heard it 1,000 times. Well, I was so busy, I didn't have time to send the pictures or the credit. I know believe me, I understand because there's days like I had a bad, it was after Valentine's Day, and I probably had 20 boxes. Well, that's exaggeration. Probably had 10 boxes of flowers I had to get credit on. I didn't have time for that. It was a real pain in my derriere to sit there and have to deal with this because I had other stuff I had to be doing. But that's money. I don't see dead flowers, I see money. And it's worth my time to get those credits and go ahead and deal with it. And, so that's sometimes, just being aware of the situation and everything involved. Um, so, Lizette, with your delphinium question that you had earlier, if if delphinium, like probably, so let me ask this. I don't want to ask a question necessarily, but if you are doing direct buy or pre-books, I don't know if your wholesalers do those things, but if they do, and like let's say the product comes in on Monday, but you don't pick it up till Thursday. Well, you can say, well, I didn't get it till Thursday, so my 24 hours is till Friday. And it's like, unfortunately, it's not the way that works. If the wholesaler got it on Monday, the 24 hours kind of started then. So you were right to flag the problem when you open the box. Because honestly, I probably would have said, I would have probably recommended going in their cooler and saying, did they have fresher product? Did they have delphinium? Maybe it was a little more money because you didn't get a box deal, but it looked good and you were comfortable with. Because if it smells funny, there's nothing in nature that smells funny other than manure. So if you got a if you have a bad feeling about it, I don't discount a lack of experience with your gut because a lot of times your gut is right and it's okay to question it and say, you know what, I'll be happy to take this delphinium, but just know that if there's a problem, I will probably be asking for credit because this doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right. Um, if they're taking it back to make it look good so you feel better about it, you shouldn't have to do that with fresh pop. I would say your gut feeling was right, and I'd encourage you to go with that in the future. So I don't know if anyone has any other questions about credits, but I know this is a difficult topic, and none of you are my customers, so I can freely give advice.
That's right. We appreciate that advice. And I think too, from just being a florist for so long, there are times where I've had product that has looked good for the first couple days, and then all of a sudden it crashes. Something happens later on, right? And so when that happens, the better relationship you can have with your wholesaler and the more, kind of setting those expectations and managing things up front, the better off you are with kind of dealing with credits or substitutions. Like I was very spoiled. And, I could go up to my wholesaler and say, Thomas, this doesn't, it looks horrible. And he would go, oh, honey, go get whatever you need to get and we can trade it out, So try to, not everybody has that. I mean, we have some florists in EveryStem that, they're driving 2 hours
Right.
to the wholesaler. They don't have the luxury of walking up the street like I did. So that's a really big thing. So if anybody has questions about credits or anything like that, you could pop them in the chat, or let us know if you have a question. We can unmute, and we can kind of talk about that. But I thought while we're waiting on if anybody has any other questions, we could do our first game. So hopefully some of you guys saw the games. Oh, Lizette has a question. Let's see. I'm going to
So,
try to unmute you, Lizette. Oops. Okay, go ahead.
okay, so you talked about if you order the product and I pick it up on Thursday and it came in on Monday or Tuesday, shouldn't they put it in water to hydrate during those days, or is it normal for them just to keep it boxed?
Sure. That's a great question. And the reason why it's great is it kind of depends on the program or the wholesaler. For example, if I'm doing a direct buy or a web shop order, okay, those are discounted prices. And the reason why they're discounted is because it's a box in and a box out. There's no labor involved. I'm not paying somebody to open that box, to do all that. And that is sometimes you think about buckets and water and people paying people, and then I gotta find a space for a bucket. A box takes up a whole lot less space. And so technically, the answer to your question is no, you should not necessarily expect that. Now, some wholesalers are better about that. Or, for example, if your rep knows, like, let's say you're doing a big wedding order and there's no heavily discounted product, it's no box slots, it's no web shop orders. It's just you place a generic order and the product comes in. If there's certain products that lend themselves to not store well in a box, I'm just going to say, oh, it's so difficult. We'll say delphinium, since you worked with delphinium. Delphinium is ethylene sensitive. So the longer it's in a box, the ethylene gas is given off because it's developing, it's the flowers are maturing, and that in a box sometimes has a negative effect. So yeah, I would probably cut. Like I've had customers who had 40 bunches of white hybrid delphinium. Yes, we cut them all. Now they didn't get a discount. Then it wasn't a box in, box out discount. So we didn't have to, that was an added service we were willing to provide. That doesn't necessarily mean that a discounted product, if that kind of goes back to what LuAnn was saying earlier, then that's an order that you should pick up, go ahead and get. I would go ahead and pick it up, get it in water yourself, and get it in your cooler because, for that reason. Carnations are another one. That goes back to the opening question. Carnations take a while to open sometimes. And if you ordered a box of them for an event, garlands, whatever, and you need to get them open so you get that maximum coverage, now you can't necessarily expect them to process that for you. I mean, for us, I don't. Our footprint is really small, and we turn a tremendous amount of volume out of our facility. We don't have space to do that. Now, we do, it's very unusual. I've never worked in another wholesaler that does this, but outside of pre-booked box orders or direct shipment box orders, everything that goes out of our place in a delivery is in water. And it is a rotation nightmare to keep those buckets flowing because it takes up so much more space, all these buckets. So some wholesalers just don't have that. Then you have another thing I might add, and that is like our building stays at a balmy 55 degrees. So things don't open or things don't hydrate always like they would in your studio where it's more room temperature. And so sometimes that can delay things. So, it just really depends on the flower, but to answer your question, I would not expect that, especially if it was like a box lot scenario.
I learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Then you know what? We're doing it right because we all do. We all learn something every day.
Yeah. And that's part of the learning of the business of flowers. I mean, it's so much different than a lot of other industries because we're dealing with something that is, natural. It is not manufactured. I used to have a clause in my contract that said flowers are grown, not manufactured. Those were the actual words because people don't understand. They know flowers are natural, but they don't understand the depths of the industry of how flowers actually, we're not picking them on the side of the road. It's where they're coming from and their long journey. And, I would every once in a while, I would say to somebody, well, if you grew in Colombia and I cut you and I flew you overnight and I brought you here, like how much would you cost? I mean, there's a lot of things
Yes.
that go on that we don't even realize as florists. So the fact that you're learning, Lizette, is a great thing. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 20 years and I still learn new things about flowers all the time. And I think that's why having Scott here is so great because there's a perspective from the wholesaler or grower side that we can really learn from. And the fact that he was just talking about how the box lots come in and they're sitting in the box, like that's something that we should all think about. If I'm buying box lots or I'm buying, direct shipments, I should find out from my wholesaler what day those are going to arrive. And then I call the wholesaler, make sure my shipment has arrived and it's ready to get picked up. And then I can go pick it up and I can put it in my own cooler and then I have control over it. So, whereas when I had certain orders, if I did a big order of hydrangea, sometimes we used to do weddings where we had 2,000 hydrangeas. And, we would have to process them. They would never go in water. We would always have to cut them. They'd have their little, you guys know how hydrangeas have the little gel goo thing on the bottom. And so, we knew that the hydrangeas could sit, but we would get all the other flowers first, process all of those, and then we would go back to the wholesaler and get the truckload of hydrangeas and process those. So that's just something that you learn as you go through the process of saying, okay, what's the most important thing? Just like you learn, okay, when I'm doing a wedding, I want to get all my hard goods ready before I go pick up my flowers. When you're a new florist, you're like, oh, I'll go get my flowers and then I'll get my vases. And then you learn, oh no, I should have had my vases prepped and ready to go before I went and picked up my flowers, because that's something I can do. Flowers are time, it's a timely thing. It's a deadline. But with the hard goods, oh, I can do that on Monday and Tuesday. By the time I come and pick up my flowers on Wednesday, I want to be focused on processing those flowers, doing the things I need to do to get them to the point where I'm going to deliver them to my customer. So it's a lot of learning. Lizette just asked, Scott, do you ship to Chattanooga? Do you guys ship at all? Your wholesale business, you don't?
Well, that's a great question. Where I used to work, we did, but here, our facilities, you know, there's an occasional shipping that we do, but it's not a regular thing. We're not really set up to do it all the time. I wish we had the space that we could have a department, because when I came to Nashville, I had customers in Birmingham and Atlanta and some other places that were like, please ship me flowers. And I'm like, in fact, I've got a text message on my phone right now, and I'm like, and I'm gonna have to tell her I can't, because we just don't have the bandwidth to do that. I wish we had an apartment to do it, because and the space, maybe someday.
That'd be cool if you could,
we get
yeah, if you could add
we,
that.
we get some amazing flowers. And my goal has always been, because I'm a big flower junkie, I'm always like, I want to create that destination where you want to come see what we have. And it's that FOMO thing. And, I've had many customers equate my sales style to sort of a drug dealer. And so that's that. But I just get excited about them. I mean, we get to work with these amazing, beautiful things. And it's like, I just want us to all be excited about it. Because if we're excited about it, I'm sure our customers are going to be excited about them. The whole lot,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
You're a
So
flower pusher, Scott. I love it. I love it. That's
totally.
my wholesaler, the buyer at my wholesaler, Brian. He's a flower pusher too. You guys would get along so well. So we have a question from Barb. She says, should you make two separate orders for the same event if some of the flowers take longer to open? I do have to drive 1 hour if I don't meet the minimum.
Yeah.
So the wholesaler probably has a minimum amount. I think it depends on what it is you're buying, right, Scott?
I would agree. Barb, I'm just curious if you can type in there, what is the minimum? I'm curious what the minimum is, because the answer to your question is yes. I so I, I've been doing this a long time. I have trust issues. Okay, I'll just call it what it is. I have trust issues, and because of that, I would much rather have two separate orders and know I'm going to hopefully get it. But you do have to also understand, like, what I would ask. Okay, 250. Like that's a respectable minimum. That's not like $500, or I've worked with some people that's like $50. I'm like, okay, well, that's a no-brainer. I would totally do that. But 250 is kind of an average, I'd say, and that's hard. I mean, I will say that it would be hard. To like, if all you needed was a couple bunches of lilies, I probably you need any hard goods? Do they sell hard goods? Because if they did, maybe I'd figure out a way to put some hard goods on there or something. I don't know. I still would probably get I would probably make the drive, and I would probably listen to a great podcast or something on the way. I don't know, maybe like the Flower Podcast. But I'm just saying that just make some, find some value in your time spent, or call customers, or call, I don't know. But my point is that you'll be happier, maybe not for that hour drive back and forth, but you'll be happier with the end result by doing that than you would be, by not doing it. Because then you're going to pay for flowers that won't, there'll be a disappointment. And then you're going to be like, why did I do that? And so I don't know if that helps, but I think that's kind of how I would do it.
Yeah, and I think, with some of our florists that are EveryStem members, they don't have weddings every single weekend or events every single weekend. But if you do have a wedding the week before that, maybe you can add that order, Barb, onto the order that you have for the week before. So we could think about, could I order my lilies? I've got a wedding on Friday, and then I don't have another wedding till, 2 Sundays from now. Could I get those lilies for that order for the Friday 2 weeks before, keep them in the cooler for a while, then let them start to open up, put them back in the cooler, or is that too long of a time? But, if you can kind of use it where you're putting it on the previous wedding order, that could also be a good way to do it.
Or if you've got, I don't know, we usually do a lot with candles. Like I've got a wedding in 6 weeks that has a lot of candles. Guess what? I'm gonna get my candles early and get my lilies and make that happen. I mean, sometimes you just gotta think outside the box a little bit, but I mean, in the end, probably it's probably better to get them. So.
Yeah. And if you can't do that, the other thing too, Barb, is that our customers are paying for our time. So if you have a wedding where the client, that the aesthetic is lilies and roses, and you want the lilies to come in the week before and you want the roses to come in the week after, if you can send an assistant or somebody that you trust, a friend who helps you do the weddings, depending on how big your business is, you can send that person to do the pickup, or you can go do the pickup, but you should be charging. We should all be charging the client for that time. So even though that's our time and we want to be conscious of the time we're spending, if we're charging the client correctly, then we're not so upset about having to spend that time because it's priced correctly into our design. So that's why, again, I know most of you guys are EveryStem members, but using a system like EveryStem to price up front and say, okay, this person wants these things and I'm kind of aware of how that's going to happen, you can really be able to kind of make sure that you're including those fees, the time we're spending, all our labor, all that stuff should be priced into, if we're doing a wedding or whatever event it is, it should be priced into that whole event. So just keep that in mind. If we have to think about going to the wholesaler twice, then we need to add a little bit more of a labor fee onto that. So Lizette just said, how open should I be with wholesalers? I'm afraid to ask too many questions that expose my ignorance and vulnerability. What do you think about that, Scott?
Well, I really love the question, first of all, because if you, I've worked with and know of all kinds of reps over the years. And it's like I said earlier, I feel like your rep is part of your team. And if you've got a team member who is making you feel less because of your experience level, I would seriously reevaluate that situation. I know I often would have customers who were like, well, you don't take, because I dealt with literally the largest event company in Atlanta. And then I dealt with, people who worked out of their home. And a lot of times they're like, I bet you wouldn't do, because they would know. And I bet you wouldn't do that for this person. I bet like I'm picking favorites. And I'm like, please don't ever say that again, because I treat all my customers exactly the same, because every event is just as important to me as it is to you. And I don't care if it's a $500 wedding or a $500,000 wedding. I know that that is your name on the line, and I'm in this relationship for the long haul. So if your rep isn't a resource for you, isn't part of your team, then you know, I don't know how to respond other than I would seriously reevaluate that relationship because your business is on the line, right? I mean, we have situations where sometimes, there are difficult things. It's like it's like a family. You have issues you have to work through. I mean, that's just part of it, right? And you want to be able to do that. And if you can't ask those kinds of questions comfortably with your wholesaler, then number one, I would start to like, okay, am I a bother? And I mean, you have to be respectful of time. I know sometimes this is an issue where because we are a candy store at our place. We have it all. But if you buy 98% of your flowers at a competitor, which is okay. I mean, that's your business model that works, and you want 5 hours of my time for two bunches of flowers, well, probably not a good, yeah, they're probably going to be a little resentful on that point because you're like, okay, so you're doing this wedding and you only need a bunch of white ranunculus and a bunch of white veronica. Okay, well, that's a really small wedding, or you're getting everything else. I mean, we're not stupid either, right? So, I mean, we know that the business is somewhere else. And so that's where it's kind of like you got to think about that too. If you're going to have a relationship where you want to be able to ask those questions and be that have that relationship, then you probably have to commit to that person too. And even though maybe you pay a little more, well, isn't that resource worth it if you're getting that resource? Now, if you're not, if you're getting let me throw some magic voodoo dust on it and magically the flowers will be better. Well, no, that's probably not the relationship you want. So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's kind of um, that would bother me that you feel that way. I mean, that would really make me want a second. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it.
Yeah. And I don't know, Lizette, if you've had the opportunity to have the real conversation, like, sometimes you just have to go to the rep and say, listen, like with the delphinium in particular, Lizette just asked, they obviously saw it wasn't good. It was 12 bunches of delphinium, and Chattanooga is a small town. That's where Lizette is. I don't have too many options. So I think it's important to understand, like, there are times where what you're trying to do doesn't work out, and it can be really frustrating. I mean, I've had weddings where I've ordered a hot pink flower and it's come in, soft pink, light pink. And I've been like, I don't think the client's going to be too upset about this. It's going to be fine. We can work it out. And then it turns out that, that was a disaster. And the client was like really upset. It happens. So we have to understand that can happen with our wholesaler too, and I would say in this particular instance for you, Lizette, to go in, talk to that person, say, listen, this is what went down. How in the future can we work together so that this doesn't happen again? And just be frank with them, and be honest. And it doesn't mean that you don't want to do business with them or that you can't try to work things out, but there are unfortunate things where you're like, okay, it seemed like you kind of were aware that this product wasn't very good and you went ahead and sold it to me anyway. And I want to make sure that that doesn't happen again. How can we work together to make sure that that doesn't happen? And see what they say. What do you think
Yeah,
about that, Scott?
yeah, I think that's really true. I think changing reps also, which is in the same company, is very awkward. Okay. I'll call it like I see it. I know that it is. It doesn't matter. It's a business decision. I can't tell you how many times some of my best customers, because I always used to kind of joke and say my dance card is full. I'm not taking any more customers because
I love that.
I literally could not do it. And it just so happened I had one customer that retired and it left open a big space. It was a good customer and he just retired. I mean, he didn't go out of business. He just got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I want to go spend time in Hawaii or whatever, so, and it just so happened that somebody else saw how I treated my customers. And they were like, And so they went to the owner of the company and they said, "Is there any chance I could have Scott as my rep?" Now, I loved this customer, and I even helped them because I didn't care that it wasn't my customer because I loved this customer. And so when they asked, like, "I know you don't want any new customers, but she's asked," and I'm like, "For her, absolutely." And so that's the dynamic that I would suggest. Watch the other reps. How are they treating their customers? Or do they, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you can see things happening, where like, wow, I see the same person. Or maybe, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of ways that you can evaluate that. Maybe even, and I don't usually like to recommend this, but split your order with another wholesaler. I know in Chattanooga, I think there's two. Is there two wholesalers? Yeah.
Yep.
So, maybe split that order and see, or just go in the other wholesaler and just kind of look around. I was in Chicago one time and I walked around a wholesale house for an hour. Not one person spoke to me. Would I ever go
Wow.
back there? Would I ever go back there? I mean, that's crazy. So if you use both, then I would say, maybe you need to start maybe observing what's going on when you go in. And if you need to make that business decision, make it for your business. And it will be awkward for a few times. And you know what? You just have to, I don't know if I can say this, but you have to put your big girl panties on and you have to go in there. But seriously, because I have seen whole businesses turn around because they had a change in their rep.
It's
Where
such a
somebody,
huge piece.
yeah,
Yeah. It's such a huge factor. Yeah.
yeah. And I want to say one other thing before we were talking about other issues earlier is also be aware if you're showing your reps or if you're selling roses or your bride is showing you pictures, be aware if there are tints in the photo. Because I had one situation where a customer sold black magic roses and the photos were obviously tinted. They looked darker and blacker because black magic is actually more red. It's just
Yeah, it
dark
is a pretty
red, deep
red. Yeah.
red.
Mm-hmm.
So when they got their roses, this entire wedding was ruined because the roses weren't dark enough and all this I mean, there was lawsuits, there was lawyers. I mean, it was this whole thing. I mean, they didn't win because, the picture was tinted. So you can sometimes, you kind of have to be intuitive. If somebody's showing you this photograph and they're like, "I really love this look." Okay, well, that's tinted, right? That's not the real color. You need to say that up front because that's part of managing that bride's expectation or customer. You could be it could be anything, but just throwing that out there because you said something earlier that made me think about that. So
Yeah, that's really important to know. And I think it's also important to know. I mean, I've had clients who have brought me photos and I'm like, this is an oil painting of an orchid. This is not a real, but I want that. And I'm like, yeah, but that is not real. It is just someone's imagination. They painted it. So it's important. And sometimes silk flowers, you'll get people who I had an EveryStem member recently, Courtney, she lives not far from here, and she had sent me some pictures and she said, I don't know what these are, but this client is asking me for these and they really love it and they want their whole wedding to be all about. And I was like, those are fake. Like they're not real flowers. So at that point, it's important to just sometimes say to the client, like, this isn't something that I can do for you, and, if that's not,
that's great.
yeah, sometimes it's better just to say no than to try to deliver. I mean, I remember this one wedding that I ended up not doing, but they wanted, this was several years ago when really the Alaska peonies weren't quite a thing yet. I think, Scott, before they were really like July, August, peonies weren't really available then. Um, and this other florist took the wedding, promised peonies, and then, we see pictures of the wedding afterwards and no peonies. And the client, was a regular client of mine that called me and said, "Oh my gosh, I was so disappointed." And I was like, well, that's what happens. Sometimes when you promise something that you can't deliver, you kind of end up backing yourself into a corner. So it's much better, I think, in all whether you're dealing with the client or you're dealing with your wholesaler, to try to be, be polite, be courteous, be considerate, but also be, straightforward. And if you're having an issue, you can ask Lizette to go to a different rep, or you can look at, other options for wholesalers. And I know online can be difficult because there's shipping fees, but there are some really good online wholesalers that you might want to check out with good reps. I've bought flowers from I Buy Flowers before, and the rep is great. She's been very helpful for me. So it's not something I do normally because I have my local wholesaler and I prefer to buy from the local growers and the local wholesaler. But, it's important to look at all your options from that business perspective. So, yeah, it is. It is the managing expectations is definitely the theme of the call. And I think it's important. So, Scott, what do you think? You want to give us a couple last thoughts and then we can do the contest with the game
Yeah.
that we have?
So I want to answer this question about how do I find the best price from reps?
Oh, yeah. Sorry,
So,
I missed that one.
it's okay. It's okay. So a lot of times it depends on who your wholesaler is, but I would just come out and ask and say, listen, I've got to, and a lot of those prices are tied to volume. So, if you got a big wedding, like you mentioned, LuAnn, hydrangeas, you're going to have, 10 boxes of hydrangea. Well, then you might ask, do you have any programs for box lot? Now, box lot means box in, box out, like we talked about earlier, but that is going to be your way to save money. And so that means you got to do the legwork. You're going to have to process the flowers, and you're going to have to make sure they're conditioned correctly and things like that. And since I'm thinking about hydrangeas on YouTube on the podcast, I did a video on how I process hydrangea, and I would really recommend it because I've done a lot of it. And
That's awesome.
I rarely lose a stem. So I mean, 1 out of 1 million. So anyway, but yeah, I would really ask about that. Ask if they have direct buy programs, web shop programs, or even just like a pre-sale. And sometimes those pre-sales come out kind of at the last minute, like almost you can't plan on them because they're basing that on like a farm saying, I've got these 10 items that we're heavy on. We're going to give the wholesaler a special. Then that wholesaler turns around and gives you the special. So sometimes for a florist, that works out great. For a wedding and event, not so much. But they might have web shop options that allow you to get on and buy farm direct through their accounts and their vendors, and then the boxes come in. That's typically the best way. Also, know this that if there's certain flowers that, like I had a customer who needed, I'm trying to think of a good example. I'm gonna say freesia, but that's not a good example. But like I need a hot pink freesia. Well, let's just say I know I will never sell hot pink freesia, but they want 1 bunch. Well, I have to buy 5 bunches. So sometimes a way to maybe negotiate a better price is, listen, I realize you might have to buy 5 bunches, and I might could find places to put them in big centerpieces or whatever. If and then you buy the 5, you might could get them to say, listen, I know that you might not need that for anybody else, but if you can do me a deal, I'll buy all 5. Something like that, because there are minimums with certain flowers, and that's sometimes where the wholesalers can lose their shirts because they're bringing in this flower. Oh, I know a great example: chocolate lysianthus. So very expensive when you have to buy it from Holland, but they're the ones that have it like year round. So if that's the situation, I luckily our importer has gotten smart. I can buy as few as 10 stems. Now, no, if I'm buying 10 stems, I am paying the most money for it, right? Because they don't want the hassle. If I were buying 180 stems, which is a box, then my price is a little bit lower. Your price is a little bit lower. But nobody wants all that extra lysianthus at their exorbitant prices that they can't use. So it's worth paying more for that 10 stems because you just got to have it for that bride. So there are situations like that. Understanding all that, I think, I like to talk with my hands in case you haven't figured that out. But yeah, so that's sometimes understanding those dynamics can help you too.
Yeah, that's really great to understand. Just kind of knowing, okay, where can I buy more of the same kind of flower to kind of maybe leverage a little bit of a better price? So, when we're looking at doing designs, a lot of us tend to go really heavy on different ingredients. We want a lot of different texture and we want a lot of different variety, and that can be really great. But if you have a client who maybe has a slightly lower budget, but still wants something pretty full and lush, that's when we could start thinking, okay, well, if I could do fewer ingredients, if I could buy 500 hydrangeas instead of, 100 or, whatever it is, if you can buy, a lot of times I'll see from some of my wholesaler emails that I get, it'll be like, well, if you buy one, it's $8.90, but if you buy five or more, it's $6.90. Well, those $2 a bunch, if you're doing that for an entire wedding, that can really start to add
Yeah.
up as far as savings. So I think kind of thinking about keeping sometimes a smaller ingredient list when we're doing the designs can also help, because then we're going to be buying more of those fewer flowers and hopefully maybe getting a better price in the long run with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Awesome. Does anybody have any other questions for Scott? If you do, pop them in the chat. And while we're doing that, we'll go ahead and jump over. We're doing a little game tonight with Scott. It's a contest. Hopefully you guys
So
saw it
much
in the
pressure.
email. It's no pressure. It's easy. It'll be fun. I'm going to share my screen here and hopefully this will work and I'll be able to show you guys the photo. So this is the game we're going to do. The first game is caption this. So this is the photo. And I don't know if you've seen it yet or not. I had it on Instagram and we sent it out in an email, but come up with your best caption for this photo and pop it in the chat, put your name next to it. And Scott is going to pick a winner and you're going to get a prize pack. And your prize pack is going to be a flower book, a new pair of snips, and a free month of EveryStem. So if you're already a member of EveryStem, you'll get a free month added to your account. And if you're not a member yet, then we'll get you a free month to try EveryStem out. So I'll give everybody a couple of minutes to add their answers into the chat. And we can look at that. And Scott, thank you so much. I mean, you have so much knowledge. We need to do another one of these, I think.
Anytime.
It's so much fun. Understanding like the struggles that, you know, you're going through as a wholesaler or as a grower can really help us, because then we can kind of think, okay, I've never really thought about before, like maybe I should think about all of these factors that are going into my design. And it does add another layer of complication, but it can be so helpful too at the same time.
I used to have a joke where it's like, help me, help you, help me, help you, you know, and sometimes it's an adventure, right?
Exactly. It really is. And I think it's fun. I mean, part of this is my wholesaler, Austin Flower Company, had a person who ordered all the plants and all the things that weren't cut flowers. And his name is Gaynor. And he would have people come in and, be yelling, so upset about, oh, I didn't get this, you ruined my wedding, blah, blah, blah. And his phrase would be, well, now, it's just flowers. And it really did put everything in perspective. I mean, like, we know it's big emotional events and, weddings and funerals and things like that. They're big deals, but at the same time, like, we do need to have a little levity, right, in the whole situation.
Sometimes, yeah.
All right. Okay, so let's see. We've got a few answers here. So Lizette says her caption is tulips for sweet lips. That's so cute. Peg's caption is, you are supposed to tiptoe through the tulips, not chow through the tulips. I love that. Kaylin says her caption is, when I spend my grocery budget on all the pretty flowers I saw at the wholesaler. I love that.
Oh,
And then
wow.
Lisa's is, watch out, world. We've got a budding gourmet in the making. Oh, those are all really good. Okay, Scott,
Oh my
the pressure is on.
gosh.
It's
I
no pressure,
know.
but yeah. Which one did you think was the most
Well, I have to admit, I kind of like the chow one, the one that was about chowing on the flowers. That was
yes.
pretty. That was cute.
Awesome. So
Uh,
we'll give Peg the win on this one. You are supposed to tiptoe through the tulips, not chow through the tulips. All right.
I wonder what my mother would have said if she'd seen this picture. I mean, I
Right? I mean, he's just
thought it was
fine.
me
Just like
for a minute.
full
I mean,
on
I thought,
melon. I mean, it's just so cute. Peg
oh
said,
my
thanks,
God.
Scott. That's awesome. Okay, Peg.
You're
So just
welcome.
put your email in the chat and I'll be sure to get in touch with you to get you the prize pack. So we've got that. And then we've got one more game that we're gonna do. And yay, Peg, I'm so glad you won. Okay, so we've got one more that we're gonna do. So let me unshare. And then I'm gonna go ahead and switch it over and I'm gonna share the other one. The second one was a fill in the blank. And so I'm gonna pull that one up and I'll share it and then everybody can fill that one in and then we'll get a winner for this one too. Because I know we're running over time, but Scott has so many great things to say. I feel like this was such a great conversation. Okay, let me share this again. Okay, so we're gonna play this one. Okay, so this one is fill in the blank. And the sentence is, the most surprising thing I've seen working with flowers is blank. And I'm not going to play, but I could come up with a lot of these answers. Scott, what's the most, since you can't win either, what's the most surprising thing you've seen working with flowers while everybody types in there, fill in the blank in
Oh,
the chat?
okay. So one time I opened a box of flowers and I had this amazing pair of scissors in the closet. It came from Colombia, I guess. They were the best scissors I ever had. They were like 10 inches long. And I held on to those things for a long time. And I went on vacation one time and somebody stole them. And I was so upset. I had them for years. And people were like, oh, I want these scissors. Okay, so I can't believe I'm going to share this. My wife would kill me. But I'm like, people would want them and they'd say, oh, I want your scissors. And I'm like, those aren't scissors. I'd say they're my toenail clippers. And then they'd be grossed out. And then they would like not want them anymore. So that's how I held on to those scissors for so long, was threatening that. But no, but they were the best scissors I ever got. And it was sad when they were gone. I know you
That's
probably
awesome. I can't believe that. I think we had a whole family of lizards that popped out of a box of Smilax once. And I thought to myself, like, I know Smilax grows in Texas, but I thought, oh, well, they just got relocated. Like that whole family just moved to Austin and they had no family here. They don't
oh
know
sad.
what apartment they're going to live in. But it wasn't just one lizard. It was like an entire family of
So
lizards.
funny.
But I mean, I would like scissors because, they can be very
They
expensive.
were so sharp and they never got dull. I was like surprised by it. But anyway.
That is too funny. Okay, so let's see what everybody's answers is for this one. I hope you guys found this really helpful and informative, and I hope you guys will start listening to Scott's podcast if you haven't been listening to it yet. But um, oh, Lisa, you saw a snake in a box of Smilax?
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Was it like a big one? No, little. Oh, okay, good. That's not so bad, but like I think I would be a little bit creeped out by that.
Well, at the time, it probably seemed like it was this big, but yeah,
Right? When you
yeah,
find it.
I know.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's see. Barb found a whole bunch of snapdragons that had dead bees inside the petals.
How sad.
Oh, that's wild. Oh my gosh. Kaylin says the most surprising thing she's seen working with flowers is the people she's met along the way. That's
Oh,
cool. I hope
that's a
that's like
good
really
one.
interesting, unique, fun people that you're meeting. And Lizette says that there are always new flowers that amaze her. That's awesome. Those are all really great answers. I love those.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know. So much pressure. Um, Let me look and see what the answers were again because I don't remember now. Let me
Oh
see.
yeah, scroll through.
Okay, I I think I have to go with the bees because I can't imagine getting Snapdragon full of bees inside of them. That
It
is
was
crazy.
horrible.
Oh my
Tell us,
gosh.
It
Barb.
was.
Tell
It
us
was
what happened.
sad. It was sad. I like opened them up and it was all the like the lower petals and they were inside the whole mouth. It was like covered. And there were probably, I guess it was like 10 bees that I found in that whole bunch that I had. It
Wow.
was really frustrating because I mean, I'm a flower farmer too. So it was just wild to see that from a wholesaler. You know, I don't know. It was just freaky. It was just freaky.
That is really interesting. I know one time I used to have this lady, this is like a wild story, and then we'll let you all go because I know it's getting late. But there was this lady, and her business was called the Nature Lady. And she lived in Arkansas, and she would come to Dallas and Austin about once a month or once every quarter. And she had her dog named Lollipop and a giant Suburban and a trailer full of stuff, like things that she would collect, like wasp nests and coxcomb that some people in her area would grow, and giant birch branches, and all kind like little birds nests, and like all kinds of quirky natural things. And all the florists in Austin would get together in like one parking lot and meet her and buy all this stuff. She had like crystals and things. And one time I bought a whole bucket of coxcomb from her. And while we were at this bridal show, like at a wedding venue with all the brides looking around at all the stuff, this giant spider crawled out of one of the coxcombs and was just sitting on top of this like beautiful bridal bouquet we had made with the coxcomb. And all the people around like freaked out, and it was quite a thing, but at least it was alive still. We could like put it outside, you know, it wasn't dead. So
It was fresh.
it was fresh. It was as fresh as it gets. Oh, so Barb, just drop your email address in the chat, and I will send you the email to get the prize pack. And Scott, give us a few last like parting words. What one thing would you want florists to know if they're watching this about their relationship with wholesalers?
Mm. Well, wow. I ask this question to my guests all the time, kind of, and in a different version, but I'm like, gosh, what did I say? I really think that, this it's important to trust the people you work with and understand that there's good days and bad for everybody and weeks, and sometimes some of the things are out of the wholesaler's control. When you open that box of delphinium, maybe nobody knew it was going to be a problem, which is sad. But this is, especially if you're driving a couple hours or an hour to pick something up, I wouldn't leave there until I checked every box. And they might get annoyed, but you know what? It's like they're not around the corner and it's too big of a drive to solve a problem. It's easier to solve that problem when you're right there that day than it is the next day or, whatever. But I just think, so much of what we do, flowers are perishable, it's nature. And working with a wholesaler is a relationship. It's not a DoorDash, it's not an Uber, it's not the get on your app situation, but it's a relationship. And even if you're a local grower, it's a relationship. And I would just say that if you don't feel like you have that relationship, I would encourage you to try to find that works. I mean, it's kind of like you're dating. Think of it like that. Like you're dating your rep until you're ready to make that commitment. You might really look at it like that because this is your business, and don't we want to have people surrounding us that have value and have relationships that add value to our business and help us all sleep at night? Because I know a lot of people want to be able to sleep good, not worrying about certain things. And I think that if we're in it together, I think those relationships and communication and those things are all important. So
That's so great. And I think it's true. I mean, I know we were talking about managing expectations and having communication, and I think that's a big part of it. And everybody communicates differently, but feeling that out, just like everything else we're learning in our businesses, it's just a constant, kind of constant learning experience. So Scott, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining us. And I think everybody here got a lot of value out of it. Everybody's saying thank you so much.
Thank
And
y'all.
yeah, we will do this again next month, and hopefully we'll have Scott back as a guest again sometime soon. So thank you guys. Have a great night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.